What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally...
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. Okay? We're going to kill them.
A shooting triggers raids. Officials scramble as a mayor collapses.
Breaking 1 minute ago. At 4:47 a.m., the frozen sidewalks of Minneapolis crackled under a thin layer of black ice, and the air carried that metallic sting you only feel when the city is so cold it sounds quiet. To most residents, it was just another winter morning, another Tuesday where the only movement would be snowplows and early commuters. But outside, in the pre-dawn darkness, a shadow army was moving. More than 300 federal agents, FBI, ICE, and a multi-agency task force operating under sealed coordination rolled through empty streets in armored black SUVs. Headlights cut off a block from each target. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just the low hum of engines and the disciplined rhythm of boots on frozen pavement. And here's the first thing you need to understand. Their target wasn't what you think. It wasn't a trap house. It wasn't a dirty warehouse by the interstate. It wasn't even a cartel safe house on the outskirts. Their target was City Hall. And the moment they moved on it, the city's illusion of safety began to collapse. Because this wasn't just a raid. It was an extraction. A surgical strike on something federal investigators now allege had quietly metastasized inside Minneapolis. A pipeline that ran from cartel supply lines to local politics, protected not by violence alone, but by paperwork, favors, and silence. But what happened next wasn't on the plan. At 4:52 a.m., Team Alpha breached a municipal annex building 3 blocks from the Mississippi River. Tactical rams hit reinforced doors. Flashbangs shattered the stillness. Glass vibrated in its frame. A security guard dropped to his knees, hands up, eyes wide, before he even understood what uniform he was looking at. Team Bravo swept a logistics hub disguised as a non-profit storefront, 2 floors of community outreach in the front, and a locked back room that smelled like chemicals and cold plastic. Team Charlie moved on a gated residence on the western edge of the city, a place neighbors described as quiet, respectable, always hosting events. And in the middle of all of it, inside the downtown corridor, federal agents converged on an inner ring of buildings that only a handful of people had access to. The kind of access you don't earn with a street reputation. The kind you earn with a badge or a ballot. Now ask yourself this: how does a cartel war start in Minneapolis? Because it doesn't start with gunfire. It starts with a signature. It starts with a sealed permit. A delayed inspection. A traffic stop that never happens. A federal tip that mysteriously dies in someone's inbox. And federal agents now allege they finally found the person who made those signatures happen. The Somali mayor. But they didn't call him the Somali mayor in their files. They called him the Gate. And the gate was about to fall. Here's where it gets worse. At 4:58 a.m., as Team Delta moved to arrest a courier tied to the pipeline, a black sedan burst out of an alley behind a shuttered grocery. It wasn't fleeing randomly. It was moving like it knew exactly where the blind spots were. Because it did. A federal agent raised his weapon. Shouted commands. The car didn't slow. And then, one shot. A single crack that cut through the frozen air and echoed off brick like a warning bell. The sedan swerved, clipped a parked car, and slammed into a metal pole. The driver stumbled out, blood on his sleeve, phone already in his hand. But what mattered wasn't the crash. What mattered was what happened next. Within minutes, the city's underworld lit up like a switchboard. Phones rang. Encrypted chats pulsed. Doors that were supposed to stay shut opened. And somewhere, someone sent a message that federal investigators would later describe as the moment the operation stopped being a raid and became a war. They're inside. Not they're coming. Not they're near. Inside. Which meant the network wasn't just watching Minneapolis. It was living inside it. It began exactly 11 months earlier, in a windowless room inside the FBI's Minneapolis field office. Analysts were tracking fentanyl patterns across the upper Midwest and noticed something that didn't make sense. Seizures were increasing, but so were overdose deaths. Street prices were dropping. Purity was rising. That's not how disruption looks. That's how expansion looks. Forensic teams discovered that certain shipments were never intercepted, even when law enforcement had the route, the vehicle, and the timing. The only explanation was the one nobody wanted to say out loud. Someone was protecting the pipeline. Then came the break. A refrigerated truck flagged for a routine inspection on a snow-covered state highway north of St. Paul. The driver's paperwork was perfect. The manifests matched. The company was clean, on paper. But a mobile density scanner picked up voids inside the freezer wall. Hidden compartments, hydraulic cavities, lead-lined panels. Inside, bricks of cash, counterfeit documents, and bundles of blue-tinted pills packed so tight they looked like industrial product. Not street-level handling. Corporate-level logistics. The truck's destination? A warehouse registered to a food distribution company with City Hall contracts. And that was the first thread. The second thread came from a phone extraction. Federal cyber teams pulled a single chat from a seized device, an encrypted conversation that mentioned only two things: frozen pipeline. And the gate approved it. By the time investigators connected the dots, they weren't looking at a drug ring. They were looking at a governing structure. Wave 1 hit with the first raids: 1 million fentanyl pills, vacuum-sealed inside frozen food shipments, heroin in bricks, cocaine in sealed tins, firearms modified for automatic fire, cash packed into insulated containers like it was just another commodity. But Wave 2 was the mechanism. They found schedules. They found route maps. They found a ledger labeled with city grid zones. And they found something that turned a drug case into a political emergency. A list of municipal employees who had accessed the same secure permit system on the same days the shipments moved. Not street criminals, clerks, inspectors, transportation coordinators. And at the top of the access chain, one user account that logged in from inside City Hall. Now here's the twist nobody expected. Federal agents didn't just find evidence of corruption. They found evidence of coordination. Because every time a federal task force was close to intercepting a shipment, patrol patterns shifted. Traffic camera maintenance suddenly scheduled. Inspectors were rerouted. And in 2 cases, an evidence room audit was delayed long enough for a seized device to disappear. This wasn't negligence. This was engineered treason, built to look like bureaucracy. Think about that number: 1 million fentanyl pills. Not in a border town. Not in a cartel compound. In Minneapolis. Federal agents now allege the city had become a northern gateway, a transit hub for synthetic opioids moving into smaller towns where enforcement resources were thinner and community networks were easier to exploit. And it wasn't just drugs. It was influence. Because Wave 3 wasn't the seizure. Wave 3 was the payoff map. In a locked office behind a municipal procurement archive, agents recovered a vault key. Behind that vault, climate-controlled shelving stacked 3 levels high, were vacuum-sealed duffel bags of cash. $8.4 million. And a binder. A simple binder. No encryption. No passwords. Just names, dates, amounts. The kind of record you keep when you believe you'll never be searched. Federal prosecutors later described it as a compensation ledger. A payroll. And the payroll didn't stop at street level. It went up. And up. Until it reached a name that made the room go quiet. The Somali mayor. A man the city had praised as a unifier. A stabilizer. A politician who spoke the language of community trust and public safety reform. A man who posed for photos with non-profit leaders and attended vigils after overdose deaths. Federal agents now allege his public image wasn't leadership. It was cover. His office wasn't governance. It was a control tower. But here's where it gets worse. Because the Somali mayor wasn't the cartel. He was the interface. The gate between cartel logistics and legal infrastructure. The person who made sure the pipeline didn't just survive. It scaled. And once the shooting happened, that pipeline didn't go quiet. It reacted. At 5:21 a.m., the first retaliation signal hit. A stash house in North Minneapolis went up in flames, set deliberately, according to fire investigators. Not an accident. Not electrical. Accelerant. A message. At 5:33 a.m., a second location, an apartment used as a pill press site, was cleared in under 10 minutes. Agents arrived to find warm molds, fresh powder residue, and empty tables. They were gone. Tipped off. At 5:44 a.m., a third location was hit, a shipping yard near the rail line. Agents found containers labeled frozen tilapia, goat meat, halal processing supplies. Inside? Nothing. Just a note. Not printed. Handwritten. 2 words. Too late. And that's when federal agents realized they weren't racing a cartel shipment anymore. They were racing a collapse. Because when you hit a system like this, it doesn't just fight. It fractures. And a fracture is dangerous, because fragments fall everywhere. By 6:10 a.m., federal agents had arrested 27 individuals across the city. Couriers, drivers, a procurement clerk, a transportation supervisor, 2 armed enforcers with suppressed pistols and encrypted phones. But the Somali mayor wasn't among them. Not yet. Because the Somali mayor had moved. And when a political figure moves quietly at dawn, it's never random. It's planned. At 6:34 a.m., Task Force Command received a ping from airport security systems, flagged under federal watch list protocols. A private terminal. A manifest filed under a shell company. A flight plan for Grand Cayman. And one passenger name that matched the Somali mayor's legal identity. Team Echo moved instantly. Black SUVs tore down an access road behind hangars. Tactical lights off. Radios low. 2 agents cut across the tarmac on foot, breath visible, hands tight on rifles. They reached the jet. Door open. Steps down. Engines warming. And at the base of the stairs, there he was. Suit coat. No tie. Phone in hand. Not panicked. Calculated. Like a man who believed the city belonged to him. He tried to speak. Agents didn't let him. They put him on the ground. Cuffed him. And for a moment, Minneapolis didn't feel frozen. It felt exposed. The Somali mayor had fallen. But the cartel war had only begun. Because when they pulled his phone, sealed it, bagged it, rushed it to forensic, agents discovered something that changed the entire operation. A folder labeled Phase 3. Inside were coordination notes, route expansion plans, and lists of contacts in other jurisdictions. Not names at first, just initials and departments. But one entry stood out. A line that made federal analysts sit in silence. If Minneapolis burns, reroute through Milwaukee. Gate 2 is ready. Gate 2. Another city. Another official. Another system. And suddenly the story wasn't Somali mayor corrupt. The story was Somali mayor replaceable. Which means the pipeline wasn't built around one person. It was built around a design. And designs have architects. Now, if you believe every public official with procurement authority should face annual audits, comment audit below, because what agents discovered next explains exactly why. At 7:18 a.m., forensic teams unlocked the first layer of the Somali mayor's encrypted laptop, seized from a hidden compartment inside his home office. They found bank transfers routed through shell companies in Delaware and offshore accounts that funneled money into consulting fees, community grants, and logistics reimbursements. But the shocking part wasn't the money. It was the structure. The Somali mayor had a compensation model. Percentages, tiers, performance bonuses tied to shipment success rates, and a separate column labeled protection payments. That column listed officials in multiple agencies. Not all named, some only coded. But enough to tell investigators one thing. The pipeline had inside help far beyond City Hall. How long had this been happening? Who else knew? And how many deaths were silently written off as the crisis, when they were really the product of a protected distribution machine? By 8:02 a.m., the second wave of raids began. Team Alpha hit a halal processing warehouse on the industrial edge of Minneapolis. Steel doors, refrigerated corridors, floors slick with ice and chemical runoff. The smell was sharp, disinfectant, raw meat, and something else, synthetic. Wrong. Like solvents. Agents breached with a ram. Workers froze. Hands up. One tried to run for a door marked, cold storage only. He didn't make it. His bag split open across the floor. Blue pills spilled like spilled candy. But this wasn't the same discovery as before. Behind a false wall, 2 freezers deep, agents found the real payload. Pallets of vacuum-sealed fentanyl packs stacked like bricks of gold. A hydraulic lift system beneath a shipping container. A stairwell that dropped into a reinforced concrete bunker. And inside that bunker, servers. Rows of them. Fans humming. Lights blinking. An entire data center hidden beneath frozen food. Seized documents reveal those servers controlled routing schedules, payment triggers, and vehicle tracking across multiple states. This was not a local operation. This was infrastructure. Team Bravo raided a townhouse in Edina. Luxury. Clean. Quiet. Inside, external hard drives, satellite phones, a wall monitor with route overlays, and a printed sheet taped behind a photo frame. If you're compromised, burn the ledgers. Never burn Phase 3. So who was writing those instructions? Who was above the Somali mayor? And why did they believe Minneapolis was expendable? At 9:11 a.m., agents hit a municipal IT office. Not glamorous. Fluorescent lights. Coffee-stained desks. A server closet that smelled like dust and overheating plastic. Inside that closet, forensic teams recovered a wipe drive, recently wiped. But not clean. Not fully. Because wiping leaves fingerprints when you do it fast. And fast is what you do when you're warned. Forensic teams discovered an access log showing a late-night login from a terminal assigned to an assistant in the Somali mayor's office, minutes before the raid began. That assistant's name? Not released in this dramatization. But the implication was clear. Someone inside City Hall tried to erase the trail. Which meant the Somali mayor wasn't acting alone. And in a system like this, the most dangerous person isn't the one who gets arrested. It's the one who sends the warning. Hit the like button if you demand transparency from public officials, because by midday, the story had grown too big for Minneapolis to contain. By noon, federal agents had seized over 1 million fentanyl pills, dozens of kilograms of heroin and cocaine, modified firearms and suppressors, over $8.4 million in cash, and enough digital evidence to keep cyber teams awake for weeks. Arrests climbed, but the pipeline didn't stop, because the shooting had done its job. It triggered the contingency. It woke up the enforcers. And it forced the cartel to move faster than the federal timeline. At 1:06 p.m., a second retaliation hit, this time not with fire. With silence. A key mid-level operator vanished. Last seen leaving a courthouse parking ramp in a gray SUV with dealer plates. His phone went dark. His bank cards were cut. His last message read, "Going north." Going north meant one thing: Canada. And suddenly federal investigators were staring at an ugly possibility. If the network could reroute trucks, it could reroute people. If it could hide pills and frozen shipments, it could hide fugitives in logistics routes. And if it had officials on payroll, it could cross borders without being noticed. This is the investigation mainstream media won't cover the way it deserves. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because 3 key individuals connected to Phase 3 were not located. One was the Somali mayor's alleged financial coordinator, last seen boarding a private flight hours before the raids. His destination was listed as Vancouver. Authorities confirmed he never arrived. Another was the pipeline's logistics broker, vanished from a downtown apartment. Passport found in a dumpster. Surveillance showed a black sedan with diplomatic plates. And the third was identified in seized communications only by initials. JM. A figure who appeared to have intimate knowledge of federal task force procedure. A person whose messages suggested they could predict raid timing, warrant approvals, and surveillance patterns. Federal agents are now operating on the assumption that JM holds a current position inside federal law enforcement. And if that's true, then the war isn't cartel versus cops. It's cartel versus the system, using the system. The Somali mayor now faces federal charges including racketeering, narcotics trafficking, obstruction, and corruption. Multiple counts carrying potential life sentences. The municipal employees are being processed. The seized servers are being decrypted. Evidence is being catalogued. But here's what kept investigators awake for 3 nights. Inside Phase 3 was a list of cities. Not targets for raids. Targets for expansion. Milwaukee, Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, Seattle. Each marked with a note, assets in place. Not contacts. Assets. Which means there are people, right now, still in positions of authority. Still signing permits. Still approving contracts. Still controlling inspections. Still protecting a pipeline you can't see. The Minneapolis network was hit. The Somali mayor fell. The seizures were historic. But federal analysts now believe it was just one node in a system that spans cartel supply lines, border routes, and the administrative machinery of American cities. And the architects of that system are still free. The most dangerous criminals don't always kick down your door. Sometimes they're the ones signing the warrants, while their product floods the streets and their protection sits behind a desk. Stay vigilant. Because the next authority figure you trust might not be who they claim to be.